Honesty is the foundation of every marriage. When 48-year-old Jennifer Morrison stood on the Family Feud stage in October 2024, she believed she knew everything about her husband of 22 years. But what happened during Fast Money would shatter that belief and force a confrontation that nobody in the studio could have anticipated. When the truth came out in front of millions of viewers, Steve Harvey made a decision that would turn a game show moment into a lesson about trust, deception, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Before we dive into this powerful story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because what unfolds next will show you why some lies are too important to ignore. The atmosphere in the Family Feud studio that Tuesday afternoon seemed typical. Morrison family from Portland, Oregon, had battled their way through 5 rounds against the Davidson family from Texas. Jennifer Morrison stood with her family, celebrating their victory and preparing for Fast Money. Her husband, David Morrison, had already completed his portion of Fast Money, scoring a respectable 167 points. That meant Jennifer needed only 33 points to secure the $20,000 prize. It should have been a moment of pure excitement. Instead, it was about to become something much more complicated. Jennifer Morrison had spent 22 years building what she thought was a strong, honest marriage. At 48 years old, she worked as an elementary school teacher in Portland, spending her days educating third graders and her evenings grading papers and preparing lessons. Her colleagues knew her as someone who valued honesty above almost everything else. She taught her students that integrity meant doing the right thing even when nobody was watching. She believed in transparency, in open communication, and in the power of truth. David Morrison, also 48, worked as a regional sales manager for a technology company. He traveled frequently for work, often spending 3 or 4 days each week away from home visiting clients across the Pacific Northwest. Jennifer had always trusted him completely during these trips. They had built their marriage on a foundation of mutual trust, or at least that is what Jennifer had believed. David was charismatic and outgoing, the kind of person who could make friends anywhere. He was successful in his career, bringing home a substantial income that had allowed them to provide a comfortable life for their 2 teenage daughters. Their daughters, Emma and Sophie, aged 17 and 15, had grown up watching what appeared to be a model marriage. Their parents rarely argued in front of them. They seemed to communicate well. They made decisions together. The family attended church regularly, volunteered in their community, and presented the picture of stability and partnership. Jennifer had always told her daughters that the secret to a good marriage was honesty and respect. She believed those words completely. The opportunity to appear on Family Feud had come through Jennifer's school. A former student's parent worked in television production and had connections to the show. When the invitation arrived, the Morrison family had been thrilled. They had practiced for weeks, turning it into family game nights where they would quiz each other on potential Family Feud questions. During these practice sessions, David had been enthusiastic and supportive, helping everyone prepare their answers and build confidence. What Jennifer did not know was that David had been carrying a secret for the past 8 months, a secret that would soon be exposed in the most public way possible. The main game had gone well for the Morrison family. They had demonstrated good teamwork, supporting each other through challenging questions and celebrating together when they got answers on the board. Steve Harvey had enjoyed their energy, making jokes with David about his tie and complimenting Jennifer on her teaching career. The family chemistry seemed genuine and warm. When they won the game and advanced to Fast Money, David had volunteered to go first. Jennifer would be taken backstage to a soundproof room where she could not hear his answers, a standard Fast Money procedure. David had approached the podium with confidence, ready to tackle the 5 questions. Steve Harvey began the rapid-fire questioning. The first question was straightforward enough. Name a place where people go on a first date. David answered movie theater without hesitation. The second question came quickly. Name something you might find in a gym bag. David responded towel. The third question followed. How many hours a week does the average person work? David said 40 hours. Then came the fourth question, the one that would change everything. Name a city you would visit on a business trip. David paused for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough to show he was thinking carefully about his answer. Then he said, clearly and distinctly, Chicago. Steve Harvey continued to the final question without missing a beat. Name something people do to relax after a stressful day. David answered, watch television, and the buzzer sounded, ending his time. The reveal of David's answers showed he had scored 167 points. Not bad, but not exceptional. The audience applauded, and David returned to his family while Jennifer was brought back to the stage for her turn. She had no idea what answers David had given. She had no idea that one of those answers was about to unravel everything. Jennifer stepped up to the fast money podium with determination. She needed only 33 points, which seemed easily achievable. Steve Harvey smiled encouragingly at her and explained the situation. Jennifer nodded, took a deep breath, and prepared herself. The questions came rapidly. Name a place where people go on a first date. Jennifer said restaurant. Name something you might find in a gym bag. She answered sneakers. How many hours a week does the average person work? Jennifer said 45 hours. Then Steve asked the fourth question. Name a city you would visit on a business trip. Without hesitation, Jennifer answered Seattle, which made perfect sense given that David worked in the Pacific Northwest, and Seattle was a major city in his territory. It was a natural answer based on what Jennifer knew about her husband's work travel. Steve finished the final question, and they moved to reveal Jennifer's answers. The first three questions went well, with Jennifer scoring points on each one. Then they reached the fourth question about business trip cities. You said Seattle, Steve announced. The board revealed that Seattle was indeed the number 2 answer with 18 points. The audience applauded, but then something unexpected happened. Steve paused and looked at his card. He looked at the production staff off camera. Then he looked back at Jennifer with an expression of confusion. Wait a minute, he said slowly. Your husband said Chicago for this question. Jennifer looked surprised. Chicago, she repeated, her brow furrowing. David doesn't go to Chicago for work. He covers the Pacific Northwest. Seattle, Portland, Spokane, those are his cities. He has never mentioned going to Chicago for business. The studio audience had gone quiet. Steve Harvey, with his decades of experience reading people and situations, immediately sensed that something was not right here. This was not just a case of a husband and wife giving different answers. This was something more. How often does your husband travel for work? Steve asked Jennifer, his tone shifting from game show host to genuinely concerned observer. 3 or 4 days almost every week, Jennifer replied, still looking confused. He is on the road constantly, but it is always regional. That is his territory, the Pacific Northwest. Steve looked at David, who was standing with the rest of the Morrison family. David's face had gone pale. He looked like a man who had just realized he had made a terrible mistake. David, Steve said, his voice serious now. You told me Chicago. Is there something you need to tell your wife? The cameras captured every moment. The audience held their breath. Jennifer turned to look at her husband, and in that moment she saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. It was guilt. It was fear. It was the face of someone who had been caught. The silence in the studio stretched for what felt like minutes but was only seconds. Steve Harvey made a decision in that moment that would define this episode. He signaled to the production team to stop the clock. This was no longer about fast money or prize winnings. This was about truth. We need to pause the game, Steve announced to everyone, because something is happening here that is more important than points on a board. He turned to David. I think you need to have a conversation with your wife. Right here, right now. Jennifer walked away from the fast money podium and moved toward David. Her daughters, Emma and Sophie, stood frozen, watching their parents with growing alarm. The other family members stepped back slightly, giving space for what was clearly about to be a difficult moment. David, Jennifer said, her voice steady but with an edge of steel. Why did you say Chicago? You have never once told me you go to Chicago for work. In 22 years of marriage, you have never mentioned Chicago as part of your territory. David opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Steve Harvey as if seeking an escape route, but Steve just looked back at him with an expression that said clearly, you need to tell the truth. David started, then stopped. He took a breath. Jennifer, I was going to tell you. I have been meaning to tell you. Tell me what? Jennifer demanded. Teacher in her, the woman who had spent decades getting children to confess to misbehavior, knew exactly what was happening. Her husband was stalling. He was about to admit something he had been hiding. I got transferred, David finally said. 8 months ago, my territory changed. I'm covering the Midwest now. Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, not the Pacific Northwest anymore. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Jennifer stared at her husband in complete shock. 8 months, she said, her voice rising. You have been lying to me about where you go for work for 8 months. The audience gasped. This was not just a small lie. This was a sustained deception over a significant period of time. Steve Harvey, watching this unfold, looked genuinely troubled. Why? Jennifer asked, and her voice cracked. Why would you lie about something like that? What else have you been lying about? David's face crumbled. Nothing else, I swear. It is just the territory change. They reassigned me and I was going to tell you, but then there never seemed like a good time, and then so much time had passed that I did not know how to bring it up. There never seemed like a good time, Jennifer repeated incredulously. David, we talk every single night when you are traveling. Every single night you call me and tell me about your day, and for 8 months you have been lying to me about where you even are. Their daughters were now crying. Emma, the older one, looked devastated. Sophie had her hand over her mouth in shock. This was their stable family, their model parents, and it was falling apart on national television. Steve Harvey intervened. "Jennifer, David, I need to ask you both something, and I need you to be completely honest with each other and with everyone here." He looked at David first. "Is the territory change the only thing you have been dishonest about?" David nodded emphatically. "Yes, I swear, I have never cheated. I have never done anything like that. It really was just that I got reassigned, and I was embarrassed about it because it meant I was traveling even more than before, and I knew Jennifer was already struggling with how much I was gone." Steve turned to Jennifer. "Do you believe him?" Jennifer looked at her husband for a long moment. "I do not know," she said finally. 8 months of lies, Steve. 8 months of him calling me from hotel rooms in Chicago or Milwaukee and pretending he was in Seattle. How am I supposed to believe anything he says now?" Steve Harvey, the man who had been married 3 times and had learned hard lessons about honesty in relationships, spoke with the weight of experience. "Let me tell you something about trust. It is the hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to destroy. David, you might think you were just lying about your work location, but what you were really doing was teaching your wife that she cannot trust what you tell her. You were teaching your daughters that it is acceptable to deceive the people you love if it is more convenient than telling the truth." The cameras captured David's face as Steve's words hit him. He looked at his daughters, both crying, and seemed to truly understand for the first time what he had done. "I am so sorry," David said, tears now streaming down his face. "Jennifer, I am so sorry. Girls, I am sorry. You are right, Steve. I thought I was just avoiding a difficult conversation, but what I was really doing was lying to my family every single day." Jennifer wiped her own tears. "I teach my students that honesty is the most important value. I tell them that without truth, nothing else matters, and my own husband has been lying to me for 8 months. Do you understand how that makes me feel? Do you understand how foolish I feel?" "You are not foolish," Steve interjected firmly. "You trusted your husband. That does not make you foolish. That makes you someone who believed in your marriage vows. David is the one who betrayed that trust." The audience sat in complete silence. This had become something far more profound than a game show. This was real life, real pain, and real consequences playing out in front of them. Steve made another decision. "We are going to take a break, not for cameras, but because this family needs a moment in private. David, Jennifer, you two need to talk, really talk. And your daughters need to be part of that conversation." The production team cleared the stage except for the Morrison family. Steve stayed with them, not as a host, but as someone who genuinely cared about what happened next. The cameras stopped rolling. What happened during that private conversation would later be shared by the Morrison family themselves. David confessed everything. The territory change had come with a significant pay cut, which was why he had been ashamed to tell Jennifer. He had been trying to prove he could handle it without worrying her. But in doing so, he had created a web of lies that had poisoned their relationship. Jennifer, for her part, was devastated but not destroyed. She told David that she needed time to process this betrayal. She told him that therapy would be mandatory if their marriage was going to survive. And she told him that he would have to earn back her trust through complete transparency going forward. When they returned to the stage to complete the game, Steve Harvey addressed the audience directly. "What we just witnessed is a reminder that honesty is not optional in a marriage. It is essential. David Morrison made a choice to lie rather than have a difficult conversation, and that choice almost cost him everything that matters." The Morrison family completed their fast money round, but the prize money felt secondary to everything else that had happened. Jennifer's answers had already secured them the victory, but the celebration was muted. They had won $20,000 but had lost something much more valuable: the certainty that their marriage was built on solid ground. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the response was immediate and intense. The clip went viral, with millions of views within the first 24 hours. Social media erupted with discussions about honesty in relationships, about what constitutes betrayal, and about whether David's lie was forgivable. Relationship experts weighed in on the situation. Some argued that David's lie, while serious, was not about infidelity and therefore could be overcome with proper counseling and commitment. Others contended that sustained deception of any kind was a fundamental violation of marital trust and revealed deeper character issues. The Morrison family, to their credit, decided to be transparent about their journey forward. 3 months after the episode aired, they released a statement through Family Feud's social media channels. David and Jennifer were in intensive marriage counseling. David had committed to complete honesty and had given Jennifer access to his work calendar, emails, and phone records. He was proving through his actions that he understood the severity of what he had done. Jennifer shared in the statement that forgiveness was a process, not a moment. She was working through her feelings of betrayal with the help of a therapist. She had made it clear to David that rebuilding trust would take years, not months, and that he would have to be patient with her emotions as she processed what had happened. Their daughters, Emma and Sophie, were also receiving counseling. Watching their parents' marriage nearly collapse on television had been traumatic for them. They were learning about the importance of honesty in all relationships and processing their own feelings of disappointment in their father. 6 months after the episode aired, Steve Harvey invited the Morrison family back to discuss their journey. The difference in the family dynamic was noticeable. David carried himself with less confidence but more humility. Jennifer seemed stronger, clearer about her boundaries and expectations. The girls appeared more mature, as if they had aged years in just months. Jennifer spoke candidly about the experience. When David's lie was exposed on Family Feud, I felt humiliated. I felt like everyone was looking at me as this naive woman who had no idea what her own husband was doing. But over time, I realized that I was not the one who should feel ashamed. David made choices that betrayed our marriage. That shame belongs to him, not to me. David responded with honesty. I spent 8 months thinking I was protecting my family from worry about my pay cut and increased travel. But what I was really doing was protecting my own ego. I did not want to admit that I had been demoted essentially by my company, and my pride cost me almost everything. The moment Steve asked me about Chicago, I knew the truth was going to come out, and I was terrified. Steve Harvey listened to them and then shared his perspective. What makes this story important is not just that David lied. People lie. That is a sad reality. What makes this important is what you both did after the lie was exposed. Jennifer, you did not just accept empty apologies. You set boundaries. You demanded accountability. And David, you did not make excuses. You owned what you did and committed to doing the work to fix it. He continued, too many people think that love means accepting whatever their partner does. But real love sometimes means demanding better. Real love means holding someone accountable when they mess up. Jennifer showed her daughters what self-respect looks like. She showed them that loving someone does not mean tolerating deception. The follow-up segment included insights from the therapist who had been working with the Morrison family. She explained that David's lie was a symptom of deeper communication issues in their marriage. He had developed a pattern of avoiding difficult conversations, and Jennifer had developed a pattern of taking care of everything without demanding support. The territory change and pay cut had triggered David's shame about not being the provider he thought he should be, leading him to hide the truth rather than trust his wife with his vulnerability. The therapist emphasized that while David's deception was his responsibility alone, healthy marriages require both partners to create space for honest conversations about difficult topics. Jennifer acknowledged that she had sometimes made David feel like he needed to have all the answers, which may have contributed to his reluctance to share bad news. However, she was clear that this did not excuse his choice to lie repeatedly over 8 months. 1 year after the episode aired, the Morrison family shared another update. Their marriage had survived, but it had fundamentally changed. Jennifer described it as a new marriage built on the ashes of the old one. They had established new patterns of communication, with weekly check-ins where they discussed anything that was bothering them, no matter how small. David had changed jobs to one that required less travel, recognizing that his frequent absences had created distance in his marriage. The impact of the Morrison family's story extended far beyond their personal situation. Marriage counselors reported that many couples cited the Family Feud episode when seeking help, saying it had made them realize they needed to address dishonesty in their own relationships. Online forums dedicated to relationships were filled with discussions about what kinds of lies were deal breakers and how to rebuild trust after deception. A research study conducted by a university psychology department examined the Morrison episode as a case study in public accountability and relationship repair. The study found that witnessing the consequences of deception in such a public way had a significant impact on viewers' attitudes toward honesty in their own relationships. Survey participants reported being more likely to address lies from partners after watching the episode, rather than ignoring or minimizing them. The Morrison family's story also sparked important conversations about financial honesty in marriages. Financial advisors and couples therapists began emphasizing the importance of transparency about work situations, income changes, and financial stress. Many couples realized that they had been operating with assumptions about each other's financial situations without actually having clear, honest conversations. David Morrison became an unlikely advocate for honesty in relationships. He started speaking at men's groups about the importance of vulnerability and the danger of protecting one's ego at the expense of one's marriage. His message was simple. Lying to protect yourself from embarrassment will destroy the trust that holds your relationship together. He shared his story not as someone who had it all figured out, but as someone who had learned a painful lesson and wanted to help others avoid making the same mistake. Jennifer Morrison, meanwhile, became a voice for women who had been deceived by their partners. She emphasized that discovering your partner has been lying does not mean you were stupid or naive. It means your partner made a choice that betrayed your trust. She encouraged women to demand accountability, to set boundaries, and to remember that forgiveness does not require immediate reconciliation. 3 years after the episode, the Morrisons were featured in a documentary about reality television moments that sparked real change. They reflected on how exposure of David's lie on Family Feud had been simultaneously the worst and best thing that could have happened to their marriage. The worst because it was humiliating and painful. The best because it forced them to confront issues they might have otherwise ignored until it was too late. The documentary included interviews with their daughters, now young adults. Emma spoke about how watching her parents work through the aftermath of the lie had taught her what real commitment looks like. It is not just staying together when things are easy. It is doing the hard work of repair when trust is broken. Sophie added that she now understood that perfect marriages do not exist. What exists are imperfect people who choose every day to be honest with each other and work through their problems. Steve Harvey reflected in the documentary that pausing the fast money round had been an instinctive decision. He knew in that moment that the game was secondary to what was really happening. A family was in crisis, and they needed someone to stop pretending everything was fine and address the truth directly. He said he would make the same choice again without hesitation. The Morrison episode became a teaching tool in counseling programs, used to demonstrate how deception works in relationships and how repair is possible when both parties are committed to change. It showed that sometimes public exposure of private problems can be a catalyst for necessary transformation. As this story concludes, it is important to acknowledge that the Morrison family's journey is still ongoing. Jennifer and David continue to work on their marriage. They still have difficult days. Trust is still being rebuilt one honest conversation at a time. But they have committed to transparency, to accountability, and to the belief that their marriage is worth fighting for. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this video with anyone who needs to be reminded about the importance of honesty in relationships. Leave a comment below about what you think. Was Jennifer right to give David another chance, or should some lies be relationship ending? Your engagement helps us bring you more stories that matter. The lesson from the Morrison family is clear. Honesty is not negotiable in a healthy marriage. Lies, even ones that seem small or protective, corrode the foundation of trust that relationships need to survive. When deception is discovered, real change requires more than apologies. It requires accountability, transparency, and sustained effort over time. The Morrison family showed America that relationships can survive betrayal, but only if both people are willing to do the difficult work of rebuilding what was broken. This is what happens when a game show moment becomes a mirror reflecting the truth about a marriage. This is what happens when someone cares enough to pause everything and demand honesty. And this is what happens when a family chooses the hard path of repair rather than the easy path of denial. The Morrison family will always remember the day Jennifer caught David in a lie during fast money. But they will also remember that it was the day they decided to save their marriage by committing to complete truth from that moment forward.